We're back. It's COMP305, and it's week 9, lesson 9, part 3 of our broadcast. What we're doing today is we're finishing up that the piece we were working on last day with the shooters. So I'm just going to kick off Unity here. And again, you guys are section 1, so the one I'm doing is FPS demo section 1. Okay. Just to show you what I've got so far, to remind everybody where we're at, for those people who haven't had a chance to watch the videos, and so on. We've got the gun in play, and right now when I press the left mouse button, I get a bit of a shot, right? And a bit of you know, the we've got a muzzle flash, right? So we got so far, and we got a bit of a sound going on, right? So if I run, but there is no impact right now. Like, we're just firing. It's a nice little effect, but it's not doing anything. So we want to add the next piece, the next part of our effect. So again, for us to be on the same page, again, I recommend to you that we go to you go to GitHub if you haven't done this already, right? And under GitHub, you go to Centennial College. This is where I have the stuff. And then under there, there's something called FPS Demo Section 1. That's the one I'm using, right? And that has all the assets that you need. It's about 500 megs. Like in terms of assets and everything else, I've given you to use for your own, you know, for your own purposes, right? Again, hopefully this will be enough that it'll help you get started on your assignment number 3. That's what it's for, right? So you don't start with nothing. It's kind of we're doing this demo so that you get everything. So most of it is ready to go. We got our firing mechanism and everything else. We want to get kind of set up our mechanism to actually have the impacts work. Remember here, if you look at our hierarchy, just as a reminder from last day, we have our player camera and our gun camera, and inside there we have a few things. We have the rifle, we have the concrete flex, right, which is really, this thing right here is the particle system. See how that it kind of kicked off when I kind of clicked on it, right? That's the particle system. We have the muzzle flash, right? That's the muzzle flash, so that's the one that kicks off there. And we have the AK rifle. Each of these things kind of are part of the gun camera, and they're all on the gun layer. Okay, that's important to note. Okay, and we haven't really changed the tiles up or anything else. Eventually, next week, what I want to try and do is get into kind of procedural generation of the maps, maybe doing some terrain, all that kind of stuff, building another level. And if we don't have enough time to do scoring today, then we'll do it next week. Okay, so we'll get almost all into it, everything that you need, and then some for your final project as well. Okay, so how do we add this stuff? I remember last time we were looking at the gun camera as the place that we added in our player shooting script. So if I could double click on that and bring up MonoDevelop here, and we'll add our final pieces to this thing just to see how it works. Remember, I'm doing an incremental build, and again, we talked about this kind of last day. Here's where our physics effects are going to go. And so far, all I've got in here, again, is the muzzle flash and the impact. And when I press the fire, when I let go of the fire button, oh yeah, one more thing I've got to show you guys is, and there's a couple of issues we can fix today if we can. One of them is if I right-click, I can actually aim with the gun, right? So I can kind of bring that aim up, and then if I press the control key, it'll fire the button. But then I get this weird animation. Look, so this, fire, and then when I let go, there's a bit of animation. I got to turn that off. So if I've already fired, click the fire button, right? I don't want the animation to go if I'm aiming, right? So I don't want the animation to fire at all if I'm aiming, right? So that's got to be turned off somehow, right? So we got to figure that out. That's one. The other thing is that I want to be able to make these impacts work. So that's what we're going to work on tonight. So let's take a look, do that. So the first thing is we want to make sure that the only time we're going to get into this this piece here is if we're going to check if this dot shooting, right? This shooting is true. If it's true that I'm shooting, right? That's what this piece is right here. If it's true, so remember I set up the shooting Boolean variable up here, right? So I said, you know, by default shooting is false. All right, so we kind of set it off as a flag. So right now, from last day, shooting is false. And again, remember we set up an object pool. I'm gonna kind of should probably annotate this object pool right here for impacts. What the object pool allows us to do is kind of instantiate the impacts ahead of time, so they're part of our scene, and then we just reuse them, right? As opposed to, and it's almost like how we reset our stuff, like I said last time in our 2D game. We reset it off screen, and then we bring it back out, right? And remember, the impacts are just particle systems, and the particle systems will emit their particles in a burst, and when the burst is done, right, the particle system will stop, right? So that's what will happen. And if we were actually looking on the hierarchy in our scene right now as it is, I'm just going to save what we have here for a second. We haven't added anything except for this little line. But if we do that, and if we go in here, take a look at the hierarchy when we're playing the game. So playing the game, right, and then if you notice the hierarchy, let me just go get out of maximize on play for a second. If you go to the hierarchy, you can see that, let me lower this stuff. When I click the button, it doesn't add anything in there, right? Like it's almost like there's nothing that's going to be in there at all. Why is that? Because the player itself already has the concrete flex built into it. So when I kind of look over here, bring the mouse up a little bit, play it, it's not like it's instantiating anything new. This is already in, right? It's already in the player, right? So nothing is instantiated here. It's already there. Same thing with the muzzle flash, the concrete. So the concrete flex, but the muzzle flash is already there as well. So we don't have to do anything. All right. So let's go back in here and add this in. So we have to know whether we're shooting. When we're in here, if shooting is true, so if this is shooting is true, we got to set shooting to false. So as soon as we're in here the first time, we're going to say this dot shooting, right, is equal to false. And the reason why we're doing this is because we don't want to continuously make a burst of particles all the time. Because if we just left it on, as long as I hold down the button, shooting is true, right? That's not good. Here's where we're going to kind of do something new, right? And we haven't done raycasting before. We did line casting on our 2D game, and line casting is almost like this invisible line that goes from the player, and we use line casting to kind of detect our platform. That's what we were doing, right? And we kind of say, well, if I can see the platform, if it's touching the platform, then everything's good. What raycasting is going to be used for, because remember, the gun is just a prop. There's no firing out of the gun. I mean, the muzzle flash and everything else is going to appear in the gun, but really the camera is going to be used for our aiming, and we're going to raycast out of the camera, right, directly out of the camera to do the firing. So whatever we can see with the camera, in fact, wherever that reticule is at the edge of our camera, that is where I'm going to fire my gun, okay? So to understand what that is. So we need to kind of set up a raycaster, and we want to kind of use something called Raycast Hit. So I'm going to kind of go Raycast Hit. There's two. There's Raycast Hit and Raycast Hit 2D. And we're just going to call this a hit. Understand what Raycast Hit is. We have to go to the Unity API. So if I go Raycast Hit Unity, right, to find out what that is, and if I kind of look at the scripting API, we need to understand what it does. And it says it's a structure that you use to get information back from a raycast, right? So the raycast goes out and then comes back, right? That's what it does. And there's different variables that are associated with this thing when I do this raycast. Okay, so the raycast hit is the stuff almost like we're using it as a variable to hold the information that we get back from a raycast. See also physics raycast, physics line cast, physics raycast all. If I click on physics raycast, which is what we're going to be doing, there's several different constructors here. It's an overloaded constructor. If you notice, there's a vector 3 with an origin of a direction. There's also a vector 3 with a direction, and so on. And there's different objects here with a layer mask and all this other stuff. We're going to do something very similar to this, and they have an example here of what we're going to do. Physics.raycast, then a transform position, so almost like the original position. The direction that we're looking at, the distance, right, is what they're doing here. This is the last one, is kind of the distance, right, that we're looking at. And if you notice here, the maximum distance that we want to go to is one of these ones. So again, the origin, the direction, and the distance is what we want to get back from our raycast, right? Okay, so what is going to be our origin? So let's we set this up properly, because this is the main, this is the kind of meat and bones of this thing. Raycast hit is where we're going to store our information. That's what's going to actually be the one, the kind of the receiver of everything. Yeah.
Is it just like every frame is just constantly coming back and forth?
On fixed update, if only if I'm shooting.
Oh.
If I'm not shooting, I'm not checking, right? So there's different ways of doing this thing, right? So if I start typing in, I'm going to start going if. This is where it becomes crazy. Physics dot raycast, right? That's the first thing. And if I open up a bracket, it says, hey, here's what I need. I need you know, some kind of ray, and the rays are a direction, a transform position, some kind of direction, and some kind of outlet, all right, that we're going to use to receive the information, right, from the raycast, and the distance, the maximum distance. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to go this dot on. Oh, hey, you know what I'm missing, right? I need some information about my object, right? Because I need to know the transform for this game object, right? My game object being the camera, which is where this script is on. This is on my gun camera, right? So my gun camera needs an access to its transform, and I want to type in game object, you know, get transform and so on. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to kind of make that kind of as a private variable that I'm going to use. That's up here. So let's do that. So I'm going to say private, and I'll call this transform, type of transform underscore transform. That's what it's going to be, right? And because I want to use my transform position and so on over and over again, right? That's kind of an important thing to do, right? And inside my start, I'm going to kind of decide what that is. I'm going to say this dot underscore transform then is equal to game object lowercase dot get component. It's almost like a shortcut that I'm making. Transform, right? We didn't do this last time. And that what that does is it creates a reference to the object's transform, reference to the game object's transform property. Component actually is what the right thing to say. And I'm saying this because people had questions about this. Whenever I did this, they're like, "What does that mean?" It's the transform component. That's what it is. Just another way of getting the transform component of my camera, because player shooting is on my camera object. If I look back down here, my gun camera has the player shooting script built onto it. That's what it is. Yeah.
Can you disregard this?
Totally disregard this. I use it because, you know what? It makes it more clear to me, right? And I do it across all my programming so that it's very consistent. So if you look at my code, you can go, this means it refers to the object that I'm talking about. And on the online, you may not see them that they're using this at all. I use it because, again, it's a consistent way of coding for me, right? And I can differentiate between what I'm talking about. Which transform am I talking about? I'm talking about this transform, right? Okay, so here back in Raycast, we'll do this again. We'll say if physics dot raycast, right? And we need this transform. We're going to say this dot underscore transform dot position. Remember, that's the original. That's the origin. So the camera is the origin of my ray. I'm casting a ray, right? That's what I'm doing. And then the next piece is which direction am I in? I can actually, you know, create a direction for this, and but I'm going to use something that's built in. So I'm going to say this dot transform dot forward. Okay, what's transform forward? Does anyone remember what that is? We kind of talked about it one time. So there's transform up, there's transform down, there's transform back, right, and left. Right? Those are built-in enumerations for the transform. And what they mean is, if it's up, it's 1 unit, right? 1 unit in the y direction. It's y up, right? That's what it means. And if it's down, it's 1 unit in the down direction, like this. So literally, they know if it's right, left. As an example, forward means it's across. It's out of my of the player's normal. So wherever the camera is pointing right now, that's the forward position. So that's what it means, right? Okay, I also need some kind of hit, right? And if you notice what it says here, it says I need a ray, right? These are the raycasts. I need a ray, I need some maximum distance, I need some kind of layer mask if I need to, or whatever. But I'm going to say, I want to create an outlet, which again is a keyword for, you know, for almost like a reference to my hit. So I'm going to kind of use my hit as a place that I'm going to store the information that's coming back from my raycast, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the maximum distance. So the maximum distance that I'm going to go is like 50 units, which is way far away. It's way too long, right? But I want to put it in. So that's like my range of my gun. If I reduce that number to something smaller, I'm going to have a smaller range for my gun. My gun won't be able to fire at things that's too far away. If it's too far, it's going to miss, right? My gun's pretty powerful, so 50 units is no problem. All right. And it's an if statement, so I'm going to put this other bracket, right? So it's got to be this, and then from here is some, you know, we're going to do some, and then this code block over here is where we're going to put all our statements, right? Okay, so let's start typing. So I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to say if hit, whatever I'm transforming, right? And this is where I'm going to check. Actually, you know what? I won't do the hit yet. I won't do the hit yet, because we can use the hit as a place to check, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this dot impacts, right? Because impacts is we're going to go back to the, we've got this object pool. We're going to get to our impacts, a reference to our impacts, and we're going to say, we're going to look at the current impact. So this dot underscore current impact. Remember, we set up the current impact as the first impact that we're looking at, impact 0, the first one in the array. And we're going to say whatever the transform dot position is of that impact, right, is equal to hit dot, and this is kind of weird, point. Right? So what does that mean, this line here? It says I want to assign the position of my emitter from my particle system at the point where I'm hitting, where my ray hits something else. Anytime my ray that I'm casting from my camera hits an object, I'm going to have an impact, and it's going to appear at that position, right? I haven't played it yet. All I'm doing is saying that is the new transform position. I'm physically moving one of the objects in my object pool to appear in the position that I'm hitting with my ray. Okay, I'm casting the ray out, hitting an object. That's where that particle system is going to appear. Okay. So I'm going to annotate this for you guys. Move impact particle system to location of ray hit. That's what it is. So wherever my ray hits, when I aim my gun, basically all I'm doing is I'm changing my camera position. Wherever I'm looking, and when I press my left mouse button, when I'm actually shooting my gun, and I'm pointing my camera, and if the camera is physically hitting something, from the middle of my camera, it's going to be coming. That's the transform that I'm using, my origin, the origin of my camera out in a straight line. That whatever it intersects within 50 units of my camera, right? It's going to produce this. It's going to move my object there. If it doesn't hit anything, it's not going to move my object there. That's first. Second thing, this dot impacts. So first thing I do is I receive the hit information. And I'm talking about my current impact. I'll do that again. This dot underscore current impact, right? This is kind of neat. And I'm going to use my get component, right? Get component. And we're looking to look at the particle system, right? So I want to say, I want to look at that particle system. I want to play that particle system, right? So play the particle system that's built in. Remember that I can play any particle. So this is the first piece is, hey, move the particle system, the impact where I'm hitting. That's the first thing. And then when it's there, play it. Make that impact go. Like play whatever it's going to be. Okay, cool. So that's the first thing. Now I'm going to cycle through the impact, right? So this is where I actually cycle through. So first of all, let's just annotate this one. So play the particle effect. And really what I'm playing is the impact, right? Okay, that's the first thing I'm doing. And the next thing I'm doing is I want to check, I want to move to see if right now I start off at at index 0 inside of my object pool, right? So my first object. Then I'm moving my second one, my third one, my fourth one, my fifth one. If I'm at my fifth one, I want to go back to my first one. So I want to reuse my first object, right? So I'm going to say this. If, and this is kind of weird annotation, you'll see again, it's plus plus this dot underscore current impact. And I want to ask you questions around this one for a second, so you see if you understand this maximum impacts, right? Then what do I want to do here? And I want to this current impact I want to set to 0. What I'm saying is peak, increment, right? The next impact, right? So first of all, before I have a chance to look, right? Increment my impact. So let's say I move to 1, right? So I start at 0. What's the difference between plus plus this current impact and this current impact plus plus? There's a difference in terms of programming. Does anyone remember why? It's actually an original C language difference way back in the day, before C language split off into C++, Java, and everything else comes from C. Right?
Add 1 after the operation.
Actually means add 1 before the operation. If it's a prefix or a suffix, this is a prefix form when you use plus plus this current impact. And there's the suffix form, which is this current impact plus plus. So I say this, add 1 to this current impact, then check the value. If I did it the other way around, I would say check the value, then add plus plus to it. 1 plus 1, increment it by 1, right? Here I'm incrementing it by 1, so it's going from, originally it was 0. Look, here's the original impact. So my current impact starts at 0. It goes to 1, right? And I say if 1 is greater than or equal to the maximum impacts, which is 5, then set it back to 0. So if I went to 5, then I go back to 0. So I don't want to ever go beyond 5 because I'll be outside of my index range, right? So it keeps cycling in that object pool, right? And this is what this is. This is ensure that you don't go out of bounds of the object pool. That's what you're doing. It's just an object pool is really an array, and you're just going. You don't want to go out of. You don't want to shoot your index outside of the array. All right, so that's really what it's doing right now. So let's see how this works, if it actually does work. Okay, so this is the script really in a nutshell. So I'm casting array. One thing we can also do is we can do a debug.draw. We kind of did that last time, and it'll only appear when we're casting the array. So we're going to say something like this. We'll use the same thing. So debug.draw, and then this position, and so on. And we'll do that whenever we're using this thing to see the impact, right? So I can put it in right here. So here's like this. So debug.draw, my draw array, right? And if you notice, it says start and direction, right? And that's kind of the one thing I want. So start is the same thing. So here's my start of my array. So this my position here. And then the next piece is the direction, with my direction, which is forward, right? And you know, I don't really have the ability for me to go to the and the length. Direction is the length, but I could go color, right? So for example, I could make a color red, right? Or whatever I want, or I can leave it blank. Doesn't matter. It'll be a white. So let's see what this does for us. So if I just run, and this only is going to hit this debug.draw array is only going to work when I've clicked the button. So it's just momentarily going to appear there. Okay, let's check this out to make sure it works. And I'm going to go back and check this out. I'm going to save, go back to Unity, and then play. If everything goes well, then I should be able to see this. Now let's move my gun into position. And I'm just going to move into scene mode so you can see what's going on here, right? So in my scene mode, again, I'm just going to kind of move my scene around so you can see, right, what I'm looking at right now. Where is my gun pointing? Right, my gun is pointing over here, right? And if you notice, there's a wall there. So if I go back into my game, as an example, and I click the button, right, I see that there's an effect. Watch. So here, right, there's an effect. So I'm actually getting this effect working. Like basically, every time I hit the ground, I'm going to get a bit of an impact. And it's going to vary according to the kind of, you know, hit I'm making, right? Yeah.
Is there a reason why it's like going through the wall? Or is it not?
Well, we gotta see what the problem is, right? But there is a slight issue we're going to see in a second, and I want to make sure that we're playing the right impact, because the impact that we're playing is this concrete flex impact. So let me just go back. And our concrete flex, there are two different things. There's the concrete flex particle system. This is it right here, which we don't play on awake. Then we have our this thing called the bullet impact, a concrete bullet impact, which we don't play on awake. So a couple things going on. Then there's a vertical puff, don't play on awake, and the vertical, what we call a simple puff, which we don't play. There's a bunch of different particles we're playing all at once. And because we're targeting our concrete flex, everything is playing, right? Because it's all one. Okay, so so we got to check to see why that is, what's happening here. And the other thing I'd like to do is kind of set up a on my on the actual fleck itself. I got to be able to play whether it's on the gun camera or whether it's on the like I did it on the rifle last time, right? But I'd like to put it on the actual concrete fleck itself, the impact. I want to put a sound, right? So let's put that sound on. And so we're going to go into imported assets just to give us some more feedback. And we're going to look here at our FPS effects. Underneath there, we have something called sounds. We're going to click impact sounds, and there's a bunch of different kinds of concrete impacts. Take a look what they sound like. Again, they sound like this, right? This or one of those. Let me just put the sound up just a little bit so you guys can hear what it sounds like. So, right. So when I hit it, you hear that kind of almost a concrete sound. I want to use this bullet sound where there's bullet 1, 2, or 3. And by the way, you can cycle through them by doing it random. So you can actually add all of them inside of an audio source array, right? And then from there, you can cycle through the audio source randomly just to produce one bullet or another. And there's an example of that. If you look at the player has an audio source that's built in, okay? He's got a couple of audio sources, right? First is he's got this jump and land, and the rifle animator is built in. He's also got an audio source that he's also using. There's no clips here. But what he's doing, if you actually look at the player's code, which is this first-person controller, right? He does these footsteps, right? That he kind of takes off. So every time he walks, as an example, you hear his footsteps kind of go clunk, 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 and they're different footsteps all the time, right? So somewhere in the player controller, we know we do that. So we can always look to see that if it's one. But what we need right now is another audio source. Right now we have one for bullet fire sound. We need another one that I'm going to kind of make public. We can drag and drop as an audio source. We're going to make it so it's bullet impact sound. So there's the fire sound when I fire the bullet, and there's the impact sound when it hits the wall or something like that, right? So let's take a look at that, and we'll make some changes to see if it works. So we're going to go back here. And again, I'm going to use impact number 3 because I like that the most. A little bit stronger. And we're going to put that now where I'm thinking it's going to be on the concrete fleck itself, right? So I'm kind of going to go in here, and I'm going to minimize this particle system here, and I'm just going to drag and drop the concrete fleck. So the bullet impact itself. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. One is, you can play it on awake. So as soon as the concrete fleck is instantiated, it's going to play the object. Let's try just like this. Let's just play it on awake and see what happens. So I'm going to play the game, and then that's the problem. I hear that big sound right away, right? And it doesn't really do anything for us. That's not what I want. So I want to get rid of this play on awake thing. But it's there. It's part of our audio source. So when the concrete fleck is instantiated, it's going to be there, right? Now, what we need to do is take this concrete flex and attach it to our camera bullet impact sound, because I made a space for it here. So I'm going to take the concrete flex object and kind of fit it over here. So we're going to have our AK rifle for our audio sound for our bullet fire. We have our AK rifle animator for the rifle animator, and we have another one for this bullet impact sound. Okay, that's cool. So we've got a reference to it now. Save. And I'm going to go back to this now. Now that I have this bullet impact sound audio source reference, I can actually make the bullet sound by playing the sound, right? Just like this muzzle flash dot play or the bullet fire sound dot play. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm only going to do it when I hit. So if I have a hit, which is here, inside the impact, when I make my particle system play, I want to play the sound too. So let's see if I can do this. I'm going to say this dot bullet impact sound play. And that's only if I hit a wall or something like that. I'm not going to play the bullet sound or the impact sound unless I hit the wall, right? So that's where. So so I'll say play impact sound. That's what that is. Okay, let's check this out and see if it works. So I'm just going to go back in here and press play, and then when I hit the wall with some like this, you hear that little sound too. It's almost like the wall's breaking, right? So, and if I aim for the sky, nothing, right? But I hit the wall, I hear that, you know. And depending on how far away it is, like if I kind of jump up on the wall here, right, and I look around and I kind of aim for way over there, you can see that I get a bit of reaction, right, to my bullet flight. But I'm over here, right? It's gone. It's not going to be there. So it's kind of cool. So far, we have almost everything we want to make work. Let's change layouts here just for a second. I'm going to move to my testing layout because I like to see both layouts for a second. And I want to see what my line cast is going to show me, my Raycast. So I'm going to kind of go here, play, and let's see what my object is going to show for a second when I line cast. Now, one thing that it doesn't show me, and this is what I want you to see. Let me see if I can move up here. I'll move up. I'll change the view of this a little bit, so you can see what I see. So here's the player, and right now the player is looking over here, right? And when I'm actually playing, you can see how his camera, that there's two cameras that are in play. One camera is his gun camera, and the other camera that's being in play is the player camera. So let's roll this up and see what happens. So again, no matter where I'm looking, see, wherever I'm looking, look at the left here. Right? The left is kind of the most important piece because if we look at it here, I'm just going to move this a little bit higher, right? So you can see where I'm looking. If I press the button to kind of, to shoot, right? See that line momentarily kind of comes out, right? See how it comes out? So I kind of get a bit of that impact going on right, as it fires. If I aim up in the sky, I see the muzzle flash, and I see a line that's temporarily drawn for 1 second. But it only hits only time it hits is, see that little thing that appears right there? Take a look at that. That's the last position of our here on the left-hand side. You can see that this position over here on the left-hand side is the last position of our object pool's impact. You can see it there in the screen, right? If I was to focus in on that just for a second and use my mouse to focus in, you can see that I've got a particle. I've got a shuriken particle that's here, here, and here. So I know where I've hit. Yeah? You see that? That's the last position. So if I continue firing at the wall, right, no matter where I hit, eventually it's going to go away from that area because I'm going to reuse my object pool, right, to appear in different places, right? So here, let's move it over here a second, sorry. And now, depending on where I put it, it appears there, you see? I have my objects, and they appear exactly where they're going to hit. So this is really great information because if we know where our impact is, we can destroy objects and kill characters and all kinds of other stuff like that. This is great for a multiplayer game too. Wherever I aim my reticule is where I'm going to actually be causing the damage. All right? Let's stop here for a second, and we'll go back into our regular split that we're going to use for our FPS. All right, so that's one thing we know. We know that piece works nicely. Let's go to the next one. All right, so I want to draw something, I want to break something, as an example, but I need an object to kill. Like right now, all I'm doing is, I'm hitting the wall, and that's a pretty good thing. In fact, if anything, you know what? I'll save this code so you can have it, right? So I'm going to go into Unity, and I'm going to save the scene. So File, Save Scene. I'll File, Save the project. Oops. And then I'll close Unity off, right? So that way you guys can get it on GitHub, because it's important to kind of get on GitHub. So I'm going to say CD into desktop, and then Unity projects, and then it's FPS demo section 1, right? I'll say git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say added impact effects. That's what it does. And then git push origin master, which will send it up to GitHub. So you'll have that piece as well. All right, so you got the code for the piece you got the code for my impacts, you got the code for my firing mechanism, right? You got all the extra assets that I gave you guys for this project that you can use for your own. Now you may not want to make a shooter. You may not want to make a different kind of game, but I'm giving you some mechanics if you're interested in making a shooter of your own. And you don't have to use my guns. Please use whatever gun you want. I mean, you know, there's some other guns you can use, other kinds of weapons to make it go. You can also make it so that you can avoid your enemies as opposed to shoot them. You don't have to shoot. Okay, I never had it in there. There's nothing that says shoot your enemies, right? There's nothing that says your gun needs animation, right? Nothing that says that. I'm showing you the gun animation because it's neat, right? And we can make rules around it. And this is where the fun starts. All right, so let's add in, I'm going to go back to Unity here for a second, and let's add in some obstacles, right, to shoot at. I think that's pretty important, right? If you don't have any, we can shoot at the wall all we want, but we want to fire at barrels or something. So I'm going to go back, open up Unity, and let's take a look at some other assets that we have built into our little project that we've been making here. So I'm going to kind of go in here, and if you look at imported assets under, not first person character, but actually under our FPS effects, we have some props, right? And under the props, we have something called a barrel, right? So let's add a barrel to the scene. So I'm going to kind of put a barrel on the scene itself. There it is. And we can't see it right now because it's not in our field of view. So I'm going to kind of focus on the barrel, and I'm going to scroll out for a second. I'm going to bring it up. So there's our barrel. Woo! Oh yeah, what a sexy barrel that is. And you know what? Let's just go right into that. Focus on the barrel. That's already been done for us, right? And let's put it on top of a wall somewhere, right? It's almost like to do some sharpshooting. Now here's something interesting, right? We're showing an effect, right? That is the impact that we're showing is kind of an effect when we strike stone. But there's different kinds of impacts we can use. When an example is when we want to strike metal, and the barrel is actually a metal barrel, right? So right now it's going to look like we're hitting stone with it. It's going to be a stone barrel we're hitting, right? And can you recommend some ways or some ways of doing it so that the barrel itself, I'm just going to make sure it's here. I'll make it inside, but like something like that. So it's going to fall. We'll give the barrel a couple of things here. We have a mesh renderer. We have a default material type. And we need to add some additional things to the barrel, like for example, some materials. If we go to materials, we have some surfaces that we can add in. Let's see if I might have a barrel material. I think I do. Some materials for brick, decals. I might have some stuff for the barrel as well. Let me see if I have under props. We might have some materials in here. We do. Here it is. Here's our barrel 1. So I'm going to take my barrel 1, kind of drag this thing right on top of the barrel. So you see that the barrel is going to have a wrapper on it. Let's take a look what it looks like. It's going to be a red barrel, right? And the barrel, I want the barrel to drop. So it's going to kind of drop from a height. It's going to go boom. It's going to hit the ground. I don't have a noise for that barrel yet. I could add like a barrel dropping sound or whatever, or barrel falling. I don't have that yet, but I could. But for now, all I want to do is add a rigid body 2D. I need one of those for my barrel. And I also need some kind of collider mechanism, right? Just like I have here. Like if you notice my scene, each of my tiles that's inside of my tiles, my maze tiles. So if I go through here and click on my maze tile, I have not a rigid body 2D, a rigid body, right? For my maze tile, I don't have that, but I have a collider, a mesh collider, right? So let's add that in. I'll add a collider for this thing. So here it is. I'm going to add a component, and we're going to call it a collider, so physics. And now what kind of collider do I need for this thing, right? If I want the barrel to fall, I need a rigid body too. So let's make a rigid body, right? The rigid body is going to have gravity and everything else. We can make it a kinematic or not. Right now, collision detection is discrete. That's fine. Let's add another component to the rigid body, or alongside the rigid body, which will be some kind of collider. And what's the best collider for this barrel? Anybody have an idea? Capsule Collider, right? Because it's the right shape. So here's our Capsule Collider. We're going to focus right in on that barrel and zoom in so we can see what the barrel looks like. And you notice how the Capsule Collider, I want to edit it a little bit. And one thing I can do is I kind of make the capsule a little bit thinner. And maybe that's not the right kind of collider that it looks like for me, but I can look at it from the top. So let's take a look at, from a perspective mode on the top. There's my top for the barrel. So I can kind of make it so that it fits the top of my barrel, right? That's the first thing I want, right? And then from the side, right, you can see that it's not quite covering everything, so I kind of want to make it, and this is the radius, this is almost like a sphere that this is, this Capsule Collider, right? That's what this thing is, right? That I added in. I can make it so it's more of a sphere. I can make it also a box. Box might work too, right? Because a box collider is pretty close. And you can see that if I go back to regular perspective mode, and if I look at this thing, it looks like it's an elongated sphere here. So if I pull this down and pull this in, oops. If I pull this in, and especially if I, here's one thing you can also do. Notice that if I click on the barrel itself, I can change the size of the barrel, right? Which is not what I want to do, right? But rather, I want to modify the collider, right? And again, there's different ways of doing this by clicking on the handles of the collider and bring them in or whatever. I don't have a lot of control though, which makes me feel like the collider is not a great one, right? For the barrel. So let me just get rid of this thing for a second, and we'll add another one and see what that looks like. So let's go and add another collider. We'll do the same thing. So physics, physics, and we'll add in, there's different ones. There's a wheel collider, a mesh collider, capsule collider, sphere collider, which is kind of what we're getting right now anyway. And this capsule collider. Let's go back to the capsule collider for a second. Notice that you can actually modify the radius and the height, which is kind of cool. So right now the height is the first thing I want to change, and the direction, which is on the y-axis, the x-axis. It's the right direction right now. Let's modify this and see what I get. So first of all, the height has got to be kind of, if you notice, only the radius is changing, but the height isn't changing. So how to change that? So first, let's go back into ISO mode, right? And when we click the barrel, we want to click on the Edit Collider, and we want to look at it from one side or another, like this. Too bad we have this. Let's look at it from another angle. There we go. Okay, so that's the actual radius. So the radius should be, the radius of the collider should be kind of, it should kind of take up the object's radius, and that's one. But the other thing is the height. The height is important. So if I modify this to 0.4, right? Or if I want to go into 5, I can make this thing as whatever height I want, right? For the capsule. And if I look at it from the side now, or from the top, you notice that this is the problem I'm having, because here's the actual what the capsule looks like, and I'm thinking the capsule's this way. And the reason why is because we're on the y-axis, right? And that's not the axis I want. Let's try the z-axis for a second. That's a little better, right? So now when I look at this thing from the side, you can see that this is correct. This is a much better representation of my barrel, right? Let's just zoom in here a little bit more. Okay, that's a little better. And I want to make it so that it just kind of wraps the object here a little bit, right? And that's why I wasn't seeing it. There we go. Sorry, I just want to get that light out of there. All right, that's one. And I also want to look at it from the top. So I'm going to go into the perspective mode from the top. That looks pretty good for me. From the top, that's pretty good, right? So the radius is pretty good. The height is pretty good now at half. And now I can also reset the center. So if I go back to the side, that center is pretty good too. I'm pretty happy with this as a representation. Okay, let's try it out. So we're going to kind of go in there, and then, you know, I should have the barrel somewhere. And I can't hear the barrel because I have no sound effects for the barrel, right? But let's launch in there. Let's kind of jump up there and see if we can see the barrel somewhere. Did it go somewhere? Hey, there's the barrel, right? So let's kind of go in there and see what it looks like just from a close-up perspective. The barrel, if I fire at it, right, you can see that I have an effect, right? So when I hit the barrel, I want it to explode, right? I want an explosion to happen, right? So how do I do that? I can replace it if I want. So there's a couple things I want to do. I want to include an explosion particle system, right? So when I hit the barrel, even though you hear this, it looks like that for a second, it's actually going to make the thing explode, like a big explosion, right? So how do I do that? Let's go back. So let's go back to my player for a second. So we kind of click on the player and click F over here so we can see the guy, and go back into perspective mode so we can kind of wrap in close to the player. So the player is kind of looking that way. I'm going to use the move my guy so it looks in the right direction of my player, right? There we go. There's my player. What I want to do is I want to set up a particle effect for the explosion, and I showed you one before, right? Like last day. So I've got some particle effects here. So let's take a look at some other ones. So I'm going to go into imported assets. I'm going to go into FPS effects, into particle systems. And if you notice, there's explosions, impacts, and weapon effects, right? So what I want to do is I want to use an explosion, and there's different ones. I'm probably going to use a small explosion. Let's see what that looks like. I'll put it into the scene for a second. And the explosion actually appeared. Let me just go into kind of center it into the scene. It's got its own lights. I want to kind of do this again. And there's different ones. There's small explosion, and there's a big explosion. So I want to put it in front of us so we can see it. So let's see this. Let's see this work. And we'll kind of put it down on the ground because as we're pointing down, I think that's our default to point down. So let's play the game, and then our explosion. So it has sound and everything, right? Let's try that again, right? So that's pretty good. So it goes this, and then boom, that's the explosion that I want. That's the explosion that I want on the barrel. So I want to make the barrel go away. Wherever the barrel is going to be, I know the hit location of the barrel when I hit it, right? And I want to check to see that I hit the barrel, right? And then after I destroy that, I'm gonna move my particle system, right? Which I'm not going to play by default. I'm not going to play this particle system by default. I'm going to do the same things I did here, but it's going to be part of me. I'm going to move around with this explosion, or I can put the explosion as part of the barrel. So when they hit the barrel, the explosion for that item goes off, right? Something like that. But the thing is, if I do that, then the barrel isn't gone. It's to kind of sit there, right? I don't want that. I want the barrel to be gone so that you don't see a barrel anymore, right? So I got to store the explosion somewhere, right? That's the first thing. So there's a couple things I can do. I've already stored my on me, right? Like on my player himself. If I look at the player, and here's the camera, right? I've already stored some concrete flex, right? His muzzle flash and the rifle, right? Again, it's all smoke and mirrors. I might want to store the explosion on my gun camera as well. I don't have to play the explosion on by default, but if I move it there, and then what I do is when I need it, I can play the explosion, and I can have, depending on how many barrels I have, I can decide how many. I can create an object pool for my explosions just the same way I did before. So explosions instead of impacts, and then I can play these explosions over and over again by creating an array of explosions. Because remember, I may have more than one item that I want to explode, right? So let's set that up. Let's set the framework up for that. So the first thing I want to do is this explosion small, I want to put inside my gun camera. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to kind of put that up here. And I know that I don't want to play, I do not want this explosion to play on awake, right? So if I look here on the explosion small, I can see that smoke thick, and I got my, this is a particle system, and if you notice it's playing awake, so I don't want to play in awake. Let's test it so I know that if I do that, so it plays in awake. As soon as the explosion is instantiated, right, it plays in awake. So that won't work. I got to store this explosion somewhere. That's what I got to do. I got to make it come from somewhere, right? I could make it a prefab, right? So I could make it, because right now it's a prefab, but it's a kind of a prefab that's inside my objects. I could rename this thing to explosion, and let's play that thing again, and rename it as a prefab. So I kind of go, rename this thing, call it explosion by itself, and I'm going to pull it into my prefabs folder, right? Because I have my maze tile, my player. I could pull it into my prefab there and then instantiate it as an object, right? Because it's a game object that I want to instantiate that's in my scene, right? So I'm going to pull it into here. There's my explosion, right? And I can get rid of it now from here. Okay. So how do I do that? Because I want to make it so that I have a reference to it, right? So I need to, whenever I want it on my gun camera, I have to have access to it, right? And I want to make it so that I can instantiate as many explosions as I want, right? So, but they also have to disappear, and they will by themselves. They'll destroy themselves. Yeah.
So you're instantiating it like only when Raycast on the barrel?
Yeah. Let's see how it works. Okay. Which is it's kind of, once you do this, now you've got your whole scoring mechanism. Because if you can actually hit and know that you're hitting a barrel or an enemy or whatever, I can add points, right? I can make explosions. I can do all kinds of stuff. Okay. So first I've got it as an explosion, which is a prefab. There it is, right? And now I'm going to go into my monodevelop here. And inside my gun script, like I had before, I need to make a reference to this game object, right? Now remember, I have a game object that's an impact. I want to make a reference to the game object as an explosion. So let's do that too. And all I want to do is instantiate. I just want to say public game object, right? Explosion. And then that's it. Let's see if I can take, if it takes. So I'm going to go back to my player camera, my gun camera, and I should have an explosion slot, and I do. Take a look. There it is. Here's my explosion slot. Okay. Cool. So I need to take the reference to my explosion and drag and drop it into this slot like this. So now I've got a reference of the explosion. That's what this thing does. Okay, cool. So now that I got a reference to it, I can make it, I can instantiate it. And I want to instantiate it in the exact location that I'm hitting, right? If I'm only hitting a barrel, right? Okay, so there's a couple things I need to do. So first of all, I'm going to go back into here. And I got to make a script here for checking to see that I hit the barrel. So how do I do that? So in my physics check right here, and I know that I've hit. So I've already hit. So this is true. So if my physics raycast has a hit, right? That's what this thing does. If I have a hit, then if hit.transform, right? .tag, and we don't have this right now. Is equal to we're gonna call it barrel. We don't have the tag like that yet, but we will. Then I want to do a couple things. I want to destroy, right, whatever I'm hitting. So hit.transform game object. I want to destroy that game object. Whatever I'm looking at, it's gone. It's going to be destroyed, right? And then I want to instantiate my explosion, right, in that object. And the explosion is going to take care of itself because the explosion is a prefab, right? I do, right? Yeah.
Because I tried that before on my other game.
Oh.
Actually, is it a spray? I mean, particle effect?
It's a particle effect.
Yeah, because the particle effect stays.
Let's see.
Doesn't die.
Let's see. So instantiate you know, the game object, which is going to be called explosion, right? Explosion. Sorry, that's why I have to do this dot explosion, right? I'm instantiating it there, but I have to move it in the hit transform of the hit, right? So I'm going to say, so I got the explosion, and now this is the thing. Now that I've instantiated, I say this dot explosion, and this is because I mean the dot transform dot position, right, is equal to hit dot transform. Actually, I just go one of these. I just do one of these. I'm going to say one of whatever my transform, or my hit point actually is what it is my hit point. That's what I want. Hit point. That's important. So wherever I'm hitting is where it's going to explode. Make sense? Yeah.
Wait, can't you put the position in the instantiate?
Well, how would I do that?
Do it like that? How is it gonna...
I'm just moving it. I'm instantiating it and moving it where it's supposed to be. Yeah, moving it, whatever the explosion is. I'm instantiating the explosion in space somewhere, and I'm moving it exactly where it's going to go. So I'm doing it in 2 lines. I could do it in different ways, but I haven't instantiated the explosion yet. All I have is a reference to the explosion, right, in my scene. So that's all I'm doing. So I need to instantiate it first before I make it. So let's try this out, see what happens. Maybe I'm going to get an error. We'll see how it goes, right? So I'm going to go play. No error so far, right? No explosion so far because no barrel, right? And then here's the barrel. Hey, oh yeah, I have to tag the barrel, right? Because I didn't tag the barrel as a barrel, right? Because that's another thing. So here's my barrel. We call it barrel 1, right? And let's rename this thing as barrel. We'll call it red barrel. Whatever, barrel. Here's barrel. And then we'll make it a new tag. So we're going to kind of make a new tag for it that we're going to call barrels, the barrel tag. Right, there we go. So it's a barrel. If I hit a barrel, it's going to explode. That's what it means, right? Okay, and now I'm going to go back to the barrel and set the tag to that. So there's barrel. Yay, save the scene. And now let's try it. Okay, so I can't shoot the wall and make it explode, but I can move this to the middle. I can jump on the wall, see the barrel, wherever that barrel is. Where did the explosion go? Oh, there, it's over there, right? That's not good. So the explosion happened behind me, right? Let's take a look and stuff and real. So I tried to move the explosion, but I couldn't, right? Because I don't have the game object doesn't have really a position yet, right? This is the thing that I have to be very careful about, right? Because I haven't instantiated my position yet. This is the problem with particle systems like we talked about, right? I'm talking about this in a very general way so you understand. So concrete flex is a particle system. It's multiple pieces of particle systems, right? Now, one thing, the explosion took care of itself. I don't have to worry about it hanging out. As soon as I hit the barrel, the explosion happened and it was gone. So let's move to a different layout so you can see it. So we're going to go to the testing layout for a second, right? And I'm going to play in the testing layout and see what we see. And then I'll move up to look at the barrel, and I can see here's the barrel, but in my testing layout over here, just going to move around. This is where I originally had put the explosion, right? Back over here. So if I shoot the barrel, right, let's see if it explodes behind me. Now suddenly it worked. I don't know why it worked, but it worked now. Let's try it again. What the hell, right? It worked perfectly, actually. It worked too good, right? I was like, hey, wait a minute, it's not going to explode, right? So bam. Oh, wait. So shoot over here. But if I shoot the barrel, wait. Damn, controls. Sorry, the mouse is the funny thing that's working. If I shoot the barrel, then that's the barrel. So that's pretty good. And that'll always happen. That barrel will continuously explode over and over again, right? That's where the explosion starts and finishes, so wherever that barrel is. Let's check that out. Let's put more than one barrel in the scene, and let's see if I can instantiate more than one explosion I'll duplicate the barrel. We'll make it into a prefab, right? So I'm going to go back into my other view. So I'm going to go from that to FPS. And I have a barrel that I have in my prefabs folder. I'm going to kind of drop in kind of my barrel in there. There it is, right? And the barrel has everything else, the rigid body, the capsule collider, the whole thing, right? And you know, I'm going to have more than one of them. I'm not going to go, you know, Command Delete or Command D, sorry, and put another barrel in play, and maybe another one. Multiple barrels, so a few barrels, right? And let's go to them. So I'm going to say F. So in my scene view, F to go to the barrel, and I'm going to move it away, right? So there's a couple barrels, and let's like line them up nice, like a shooting range. So we'll put one over here on this part of the screen, and we'll make that fall down. And grab another one, move that over here, and we'll make this fall down too. So it'll all fall down because they're all objects. And then we'll play the game, right? See what happens. So I'm going to move over here, they all fall. And then as they fall, I've got one barrel. Oh, one barrel fall down here, look. And if I fire at it, barrel exploded over there, right? Look. Now that barrel exploded over there, right? How come that's happening? Huh? Let's try that again. There it is. So I kind of set my barrels are running. So I'm going to run over here, see if I can find my barrels. Hey, there's a barrel, and there's one down here. So something a bit. That's a bit of a problem, eh? Oh wait, that explosion's over there, and that's kind of a weird. What the hell is going on there? See that? Woohoo! Oh yeah, that was a bit of an issue. This is because we looked through the wall. I was looking through the wall there, right? And that's what happened there. Well, that's bizarre. That's never happened to me with this game, eh? Have you noticed that before?
Yeah.
Maybe it's the way I made my scene, when I kind of layered my scene together. And some other minor defects. Oh, that's weird. See that? Bro. Why am I seeing that? I can tell you why, by the way. My gun, right? And the way I'm seeing my gun, I'm getting another camera-like effect that's being into play. So if I was to look at my, let's go back. Let's go back into my testing mode so you can see what I'm talking about, right? So if I look here and on the left, I want to see my player, what I'm doing. Where am I? I'm going to kind of go over here and look at the hierarchy for a second and click my player. That's a big glitch, eh? Look at my hierarchy, zoom out here. And let's see what he's looking at, my player. And let's see what he's got. He's got two cameras, one that's here that's really, really short, and one that's really, really long, right? So as I'm playing my game, you can see what he's looking at, right? He's looking at the wall, and I got a really big kind of view of what I'm seeing. It's clipping way, way over here. And I'm able to look through the wall because I have two different layers that I'm looking at, and one of them is the gun layer, right? So that's what I'm looking at right now. That's how far he's looking away. And I'm pointing at my camera is actually over here. He's pointing at the wrong thing. So if I go back and F, let's go back to my player for a second. And again, then we'll take a bit of a break and we'll come back and try and fix it all. Oh, by the way, take a look at these concrete flecks, these clones that haven't gone away, right? They'll never go away. They're invisible. They're not being played. But these clones are going to be, there's part of our object pool, like I talked about before, right? All right, so let us hit the player and then press F, focus in on them. And then what I want to do is I want to change my view so that I'm looking at the player's view. There it is. And see what the player's seeing. How come he's seeing that weird effect, which I never saw before until I started firing, right? Before I was able to walk around, no problem. I didn't have that issue at all. I don't know if you noticed that. Okay, so let's go back into this scene and see what I'm looking at. So here is where the gun is looking at right now. And if you notice, I'm okay here, but as I turn to this side, over in this part of my wall, I'm able to look through the wall. Here's another funny effect, right? That's not what I wanted. So here I want to fire at the wall. You see that the shuriken just stays right where it is, right? On the ground, or in front of me. It's just a particle that kind of hangs out, right? That's what's going to happen right now. And there it is right now. Depending on where I fire, it's going to be appearing on my scene, right? But if I fire at that barrel, man, something's going to happen. Let's see what happens. Like why that happened, right? Because remember, it has to be only the barrel that I'm hitting for the explosion to go, right? Yeah. Could be. So how do I set it up so that whenever I hit, the place where I hit, I instantiate the object? So I want to instantiate the object in a particular location as opposed to where it's going to be. How do I do that without scripting the barrel, scripting the explosion? Because the explosion is kind of something that's been given to us, right? I can certainly modify it, but let's go back. So let's take a look, first of all, to understand what the explosion is doing, and then we'll take a, actually, you know what, let's take a short break, and then we'll go back and look at everything else and see how we can fix the game.